All right, here we go. It's another Sunday night. It's another live stream. I'm going to wait for some people to show up. I should turn off notifications on my phone when I go live because it always goes off whenever I go live. Hey. Oh, audio's great. That's great. Thank you. I was going to ask about that. And you know what? I don't recall clicking slow mode, but sometimes I'm just rushing through to get the stream started, especially when I wasn't really sure what I was going to do tonight. I knew I was going to, I had about 3 or 4 things I was going to do. I was leaning heavily towards doing inking a full panel of Conan tonight. That was the initial plan, but the Conan pages are pretty ink heavy. A lot of drawing, a lot of rendering. It's a black and white book. Even though I'm going to be doing some digital ink washes, I don't want the book to be reliant on them. I really want the ink to be there. And then I got stupidly elaborate for the Things Are Getting Sketchy stream last night. Hey, Stacy. And instead of just drawing a Hellboy bust, which is what I should have done for the stream. I don't know if any of you guys seen it, but I ended up doing this stupidly rendered the hell out of it, a Hellboy piece that I ended up working till 1 a.m. to finish inking, and then after that I was like so wired from working so intensely, I ended up rewatching one of my favorite movies. On a stupid whim. It's this great Paul Newman movie directed by John Huston called Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean. It's not a great movie, but it's a movie I have an unreasonable amount of affection for. So then I woke up at my usual time, staggeringly tired, got up, started working on Conan. And I got to say, I think everyone who's been following the stream knows I use these pens, right? These Oto graphic pens for most of my line work. Since Wednesday, and I don't know why I'm aware of it since Wednesday, because I went through a couple before Wednesday, but since Wednesday, I've gone through 8 of these pens between all the inking. And that's a lot of rendering. That's a lot of drawing. That is... and I realized about 2 hours ago, I am just so fried. If I start just inking that Conan panel, it'll be a silent night. I won't have the ability to do anything other than make lines. Then I found, here we go. And then I ended up stumbling across a pencil drawing I did. I don't know if you can see it because I printed out light blue. And I was thinking, maybe I could do just a witch drawing, nice laid back witch drawing. And as soon as I printed it out to potentially do tonight, I realized the hat is monstrously huge. It's just a real simple. This is like one of the sketches I did. It's kind of like a backup in case something went wrong and I needed to do something in a rush for Witchtober last month. I realized the hat is stupid. I mean, it's let me get a pencil. I had one. I wrote some notes and then I put it. Oh, there it is. All right. So you have front cheekbone. So our eye line's here and then our forehead's there. And we have a jaw here and it's tilted. So it's a 3/4 shot. And so our back of her head's here. So this is her head. And the hat is like way out there. And I was kind of like, I was looking at it, I said, well, that might be fun, show how I can make a mistake and then fix it in ink. I already made a solution. And while I'm looking at the witch, I went, you know what? I really got to start on the Witch House, which will be the book I'll be doing through Zoop next October. And if you missed my talking about it in the past, Coven, the Witch House is going to be a bunch of short comic stories about the witches who live in the witch house and what the witch house is, suggest some of the history, what it's like to be a witch, explain basically world building. And I went, well, I got about 4 stories plotted out, some more detailed. The first one's very much worked out. And I went, you know what? Maybe because I want the first story to drop in January, as I said before. Maybe we're almost in December. Maybe I need to start working on that first story now. And then I put two and two together. You know what? Some people have asked me about layout, how I approach it, the aspects that go into it, all the thinking, because it can get a little complicated, it can get a little dry. But I figured here I'm actually tonight. I'm going to go through the process of how I think about and how I lay out a page and how you have to come up with options and thumbnails and all that stuff. I did a little bit of that with that Conan panel I worked on a couple of weeks ago, but I figured this page is different enough. And since I'm writing it, I can change things if I have a brilliant idea or what I think is a brilliant idea um, while in the process of working on it. So I have off to my side here. I have my plot. Um, it has a lot of notes and spoilers on the page, so I'm not gonna make the mistake of taking anything that I don't want to have to try and delete off of camera, like Jim Zub's phone number, which I happily got rid of. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the first page from Coven, the witch house workhouse. All right. So the very first story is going to be about a young woman approaching and doing what needs to be done to essentially apply to become a witch. It's a truly bizarre job interview as far as they go, and the first page of the story is incredibly important because it does a number of things have to be on this. So it's the first of um, at least 7 or 8 stories. The more stories that get done by next hour, the bigger the book's going to be. So right off the bat, in that very first page, I have to think, what visual tone am I setting? Is it going to be freeform? Every story's completely different. Are there going to be any recurring visual elements, motifs, what have you? Am I going to do an EC Comics type narrator, like an old witch? Here we got a comic page, and up here you have a headshot of a witch, smiling, of course, telling the story, with a big word balloon, or even just a caption box that she's contained in with her dialogue, and then the story starts. I mean, the old classic EC mode. Everyone's immediately going to get it. And what type of effect that would have? Like, would I have this witch at the start of every single story? And I'm telling you right off the bat, no, I'm not doing that. But that is part of the consideration when you're creating something. I really feel any creator who doesn't look at all the possible options they can conceive and balances them out between whether to do them or not. Are they a good idea? Are they a bad idea? Are they a good idea in this situation, or are they a bad idea right across the board? Um, so I realize I want um, something that really underlines the fact that they're stories, they're standalone stories, and and gives me a specific way to communicate to the reader, this is the start of a new story. Um, and to me, the easiest way to do that, it's almost like if you pick up like an anthology book, and every story, when you finish the story and you turn to the next story, first thing you see is the title of the story. So right off the bat, I know, instead of like, a smiling witch, although she looks like she's sticking her tongue out here. Although that'd be kind of fun. She's what's that Japanese porn face I've seen people talk about, mostly on Blue Sky, because so many people doing erotic comics on Blue Sky. Hiego? I'm probably butchering that. I'm probably it's God, don't ask me to draw my. Oh, I should draw it down here. It's I think they cross their eyes. This is the content you guys have signed up for. Me going off on porn I don't even check out. So they cross their eyes. They have their usual anime button noses, and they're smiling. And I think they got their tongue out. I think. God, I'm not entirely sure. Someone will correct me, I'm sure. Um, that's a terrible looking tongue. The idea being it's some sort of like, I guess, out of control ecstasy that your face just goes all goofy. Of course, and you're not supposed to see witch eyes, so I mean, I guess I can't do that. So this isn't a witch. This is oh, you know what it is? It's a devil girl. There we go. It's a devil girl doing Iago face. It's a tie-in with Shakespeare and Othello. It's Shakespeare porn. Yeah. Anyway, God, why do this should tell you right off the bat how punchy I am. So anyway, so no weird Japanese porn face, no talking head EC comic. The idea I'm running with is every page is going to have a narrow bar right at the top. Just it's probably going to be the same font, probably a nice, very simple, direct font with a heavy line. Probably something like Impact or Hellschweiter or Hellschweiter. I don't know. So it would just literally have the story, the title of the story. So it'd be, you know, I'm not really, casting fonts here, and I'm not going to. I'm probably not going to hand draw it. I might have like someone go, oh, if I do the hand drawing, I can do this or something. Um, it's going to be flush left. I just feel I could center it, but I feel like flush left really kind of lets the left to right reading kick off right off the bat. So every single first page of the stories for the Witch House are going to have this as it. So the first one's going to be called The Witch House. I don't want to give away the spoilers for the other stories yet. Possibly also because I'm not 100% in love or locked in on the story title so far. But the first one's called The Witch House. Now, this first page, because of short stories, I feel that each page has to be a little more visually dense, a little more narratively dense. Whereas most comics these days seem to run on an average of 4 to 6 panels. I think I have to run 5 to 7 at least. Some pages are going to be more, some pages might be less, depending on the visual impact. I feel with shorter stories, like if I'm dealing with an average of 6 to 10 page stories, splash pages are unless it's so absolutely 100% necessary, splash pages are killing your real estate. And when I say real estate, comics are page space. You have only a limited amount of space to show narrative beats, allow room for the dialogue, have the characters interact with either other characters or the environment. And you can only do so much visually on a page. And I don't want to be lazy and let things bloat. I want nice, tight stories that would, in any other book with like an unlimited amount of space and time, there would be 12, 15 page stories. I want to take those 12, 15 pages of what would be contemporary comics and push them down into 6 to 10 pages. So that means the average page is going to be 6 to 7 panels, unless it has a big panel, which will like eat up some of the space. And I have my story beats. I got my story beats over here to the side, but I'm going to write them here. So I have my story title, which is already taking up some of the landscape of this comics page. So already I'm losing what, a half inch at the top of the comic page. Now this is not to scale or anything, but I'm already lost a half inch of this comic page, and it changes the potential shapes of everything else that happens on this page. I've talked to young comic artists who don't seem to understand that comic layout in many ways is a jigsaw puzzle where all the pieces are blank until they're put into place. All the pieces are infinitely sized, so you have to make a decision on which piece you're choosing, and it forces you to choose different pieces to fill up the rest of the jigsaw puzzle. And you still have to get to the end beat. So the beats on this very first page for the first story for Coven the Witch House already has this. The Witch House is one of the little beats. It's a tiny little beat. It's like a little at the start of a song. And I want to show the house. It's important to show the house because that's the point of the house. And so there's been one drawing previously of the house, in sort of detail in the background with the witch riding the giant black goat. It's a very old, quasi-Victorian, Edwardian, made-up Gothic architecture type thing. And I want to draw it big enough that we get a sense of the house, but I very much want a sense of place. So for the first panel, I'm marking off the space just as the initial step. It's until you make a line on a page, until you make a decision on a page, you can't know if it's right or wrong. At least I can't. I mean, there may be creators out there who know exactly what they're doing from the very first moment. I play with my work. So this is like a third of what's left on the page. Just this little bit here, because I want to show the house. But I also want to show the environment it's in and its place. So it's not just going to be a diagrammatic drawing of the house. It has to be a sense of the house in the environment, which generally means you need more space around the house. And if I want that house to be reasonably detailed, it means it has to be a bigger panel. So let's say I draw the house here. I could draw the house here. I could draw the house here. I could draw it right dead center. I like the idea of like looking through something and then ending up here. And I'm just drawing an actual graphic shape to get a sense of the weight that this might have. It's going to be a black house, of course. Okay, and I want a sense of environment behind it. And also want to, let me give it a sense of roof. I'm just creating random juggage. I do have a photo file or a file of photos of houses from the period that are what I'm using to delineate the aspects of the house. I have friends who I could probably reach out to do a 3D model of the house, at least for the exterior, so I could keep it far more consistent. Although as the story goes, there's going to be a reveal that the house actually can't be consistent. It has a look, but it doesn't have a very specific anatomy, by way of putting it. So here we go. We got a dark house. I'm just going to fill it in. Now, even though I'm filling this in, doesn't necessarily mean that this is what I'm going to stick with. Let me read comments. Oh, here we go. Well, this is Stacy. This is what I'm talking about tonight. Yeah, splash pages, Anson. I can't agree with you more. I think when I used to teach design and composition, one of the things I hope I got across to my students was spatial importance. And the importance is determined by what actually takes up the most positive and negative space. If you have two identical pictures, badly designed squares, badly drawn squares, and we have guy looking off into the distance. Let's give him a hat. I just got one of these hats last year, and I don't get to wear it enough. So I'll just draw that hat on him. A scarf. And we suggest he's in the mountains. Because of his size and dominance in the foreground in relationship to the mountains, he's the most important aspect of it. So it's this drawing is about this guy among the mountains. However, if I do this, this drawing, this composition is a lot more about the environment than the guy who's in it. The guy gives a scale. He is still a part of the composition, but just by putting the emphasis on the mountains in this composition, it changes. This image, even narratively, it could be important just to establish place. It's an establishing shot, but this panel is about the environment. It's showing you where he is, the scope of where he is. Here, there could be like just off panel, there could be his sidekick. There's a big goofy mustache and a similar bowler. Give him a bowler. And a big muffly scarf because it's colder and this guy's cool. This guy needs a big muffly scarf. This guy could be just off the thing. And you know what? Just even further, a little further off here, there could be a car and a little concession stand. Here, let's pull this over here. The more space we isolate him in, the more he feels outside in the wild. So these type of decisions are intrinsic to how you design a panel, how you attach importance to the space of this panel. So these are important elements. So when I do the house here, I'm establishing there's a lot of space about it. So it has a very isolated environment. And I do like drawing my trees because trees are great at giving a time of year. Trees are great at the time of year. If I do big, bushy, leaf-laden trees, and all the trees are brilliant green, we know it's summer or late spring. If it's like trees with tiny little buds of light green just showing up everywhere, we spring. Trees full of autumn colors, it's the fall. Barren trees, late fall into winter, depending on the environment. So this story is going to be set in an environment similar to Toronto. So it's think northern US along the Canadian border, towns like Winnipeg, Calgary, Toronto. So when the end of October hits, there may not necessarily be snow, but there's no leaves. The trees are barren. And our landscape is filled with these barren, wonderfully spidery trees filling the entire background. So we get this black shape. Just to show you how dark it's going to be. It's really going to be almost all black ink with like little indications against that landscape of trees. And then there might be, one or two trees just a little bit closer in the foreground. So the trunks go up a bit more to make it cut off at the top of the panel. just to give sense of depth. There's the bushes and shrubbery that'll be around the tree. So I've established in a bunch of the witch drawings there is forestry around it. Now this looks like there's this long barren walk up um, to the witch house. But I also know the next story beat. I want to establish that there's a young woman who's about to approach the witch house for the ritual. And I'm going to draw another tree in here. I actually have a tree in the foreground more, because that's going to be important to the story. May not necessarily be there, but it's everything's moving towards the witch house. And so, because my next panel, I know for a fact what the character is doing, where the character is. It helps from a narrative standpoint to try and have that fake camera as I compose the image. The camera is her view, so she's standing in the woods. So I am going to do all these dark trees. So the idea is the reader is standing in nearby trees, looking across the landscape at the witch house with more trees in the background. So this panel, whether or not this is an idea, I've done a few layouts for this page already, so I'm kind of cheating, but I'm not in love with them. So this makes it a really, really good, solid piece to do here. This establishes the camera's in the woods, looking at the tree with this barren environment around it, this open field. I might draw like, abandoned shrubs, some leaves floating around, an indication that there's something happening here in this spot. I could even draw another tree going right in front of the house. And if I do it, I could, there it is. What if I made these pine trees, right? This is a nice decision. Pine trees are everywhere. So I could actually make these beautiful white trees. Have some branches in the foreground. In the foreground, they'll come much more forward against that background of the witch house, which is now partially hidden by a tree. It as dark and mysterious as the house already was, now it's a little bit hidden by the environment. I can throw some branches around it. So we're looking through the trees at the house. And so now I've taken up, my pages are a little bit taller. So let me pull the page down a bit, make that a little more fair. The page still good on the camera, I mean. So already I've at this point, I now have a narrative technique I'm going to use on every story, all 6 to 8 stories. I now have a very narrative rich panel. Gives a sense of place, the environment, where everything is going. What do I do with it? Well, next I want to establish who's looking at it. And I think that's important. But I've also set up this nice landscapey thing. So I'm gonna roll with that. I might change this later, of course. Excuse me. I'm going to do a smaller panel. We have all these trees. We're going to have like undergrowth. And standing here, we're going to have this. I'm going to do all the trees here a bit more. I got all these shortcuts for drawing trees. Going to have this young woman, the backpack, and she's actually looking in the direction of the house. She could be looking at the viewer. That's a call. I can make when it actually comes time to do the drawing. She's wearing a backpack. The color note is this is going to be late at night, so it's going to be light ground, darker sky. It's not going to be pitch black yet because I want the reader to see things, and it'll get dark when I do lighting effects later in the story. One of the important things for me is this is going to be a light-haired, not necessarily blonde, but a light-haired young woman. Okay, so as dark as that looks, that's just me being sloppy with my pencil. So I got the house here, opposite, standing here. And by doing the diagonal, yes, we're looking left to right, coming back down here, your eyes pull to the figure, right? And by doing this, we establish she's in the woods looking at the house. The implication is that this is our point of view of the house. This is her. We're seeing what she's seeing. Okay. And it's smaller, and so we know, okay, so and there's no one else with her. Okay, it's just these trees. There could be someone hiding in the trees. I would be drawing these pine trees again, of course. Not pine, birch trees. To really, really get it across. I mean, if I really wanted to be pedantic, I could draw the back of her head here. I don't want the human sense there. I mean, she could have just arrived at this panel. Now, I think it's important, and it's a story beat here. There's going to be narration. She's not going to be talking. The entire story is going to be narrated. Okay, so I'm going to do a smaller still panel. So you notice they're kind of like shrinking. So it's like getting tighter, a little more claustrophobic. But I'm also going to zoom in on her face. Now I can zoom in, like literally zoom in where we're staying exactly where she is in relationship to the top panel. So I can put that there. So we go left or back down and straight down. I could zoom out a little bit less, or I could actually a little bit more space, but I'm considering the other beats I want to do here. And so I think that might be the right size face. I zoom out a bit. I probably, you know what? This is too close. I want it to be close enough to see her face, get a sense of who the character is, that she's looking at the house. At this point, yeah, I'm going to have her looking at the house and at the reader at the same time. I wanted to establish it's cold, so she's going to be wearing a heavier coat. I want to get close enough to establish there's a bit of trepidation on her face. I think that's incredibly important from a storytelling narrative aspect of this. She's a little bit worried about what she's doing. We got the backpack here. And then we have the trees. Okay. Now, there's a lot of things I could literally do right here. I could narrow it still and zoom way out. This is not necessarily what I'm going to do. I could zoom right out. This could be the trees and the forest and everything. Landscape. Establish another tree. And then have her leaving the forest. Just a tiny little panel of her walking towards the house. And that explains that it's very pedantic, a lot of good storytelling. In the meat and meat and potatoes aspect of storytelling, being pedantic and direct and letting the reader understand what they're seeing and what's happening is often the best possible narrative choice. It's not the coolest, it's not the slickest, it's not the most dynamic, but my job as a storyteller, not someone who's trying to sell pages. I like selling pages, but my job as a storyteller is to tell the story. So tightening up everything to here and having her walk out, not necessarily showing the witch house. I can actually have some of that type of spidery tree in the background indicated, that tree in the midground there, and then indicate that space. Okay, that I have here. So I reestablished that, and I established the relationship that she's now. I'm going to put more trees to establish that the whole area is like surrounded by trees. And the forest gets darker as she walks out of it. So again, it's like I have everything going here. And honestly, I got the line. She's a little bit over here. What I really need to do then, I feel, to establish that there's movement. So she's slightly moving here. I'm going to move her here. Put the spidery trees here. Give a little gap in the trees around here to make her pop on the horizon. Try not to be too obvious about it, even though it's part of how I'm doing to make sure. By having that, here's a good example, that Hellboy piece I did last night. Part of how you make something pop is you have it rise above the environment. So Hellboy breaking above the tree line and the hill behind him and not having the castle run into his face, his head pulls you into the entire figure. And then, you see all those like details in this incredibly dark piece. Even in these tiny, tiny little panels where you have a small figure, just having it break the horizon line and be a little isolated readily allows the viewer and reader to know what they're looking at, know where they're supposed to look at, and it works. It just works. Now, in this bottom panel, and this is important, and this might be, and this is still not really comic formatted. It's still too squat. Comic pages are tall, which allow for a lot of fun stuff like this. So I can open it up again. Okay. And because we established she's walking in the woods, I can now do something like that. I want a sound. I'm going to show what this is in this tree. So I'm flipping the camera a bit. So that tree is now coming over here. So some roots, some branches and stuff. And we have I think everyone knows what I'm drawing here. We're going to have these dark and burnt out spots where nothing's growing. There's going to be like other grass, like dried out fall grasses, leaves and stuff. And there's going to be a stone right here in the middle, a black stone. And we're just going to show that the grass is not growing inside the pentagram. So we have grass growing all outside the star. So that gets that across, and just to establish that this is where she's walked, we draw her legs and her feet. Okay, a little bit of a shadow, and then way far in the background, we can do that forest. So narratively, okay, what should I have done? I think. So we're doing this slight movement here, and then all of a sudden I drew her legs back here. Maybe what I need to do, allow that tree line to remain, have her standing here. One of the wonderful flexibilities in terms of layouts, I can, the seams on the other side of the tree, what I may need to do, erase that tree, have that tree up here on this side. Wow, the lead's almost all gone. There we go. Have that tree here established. And you know what? I could even do something like where there's like something tied around it at the base, like a ribbon. Okay. And then I have the ribbon here. In fact, I forgot to draw the ribbon. It's actually in the script. And so this is where she's standing. So we have her show the house. We have from the point of view of the person who's about to approach the house. We show the person who's about to approach the house, show her that this is not like necessarily a super happy thing. She's a little worried about it. Show her crossing the distance and showing what she was approaching, this that weird shape that she was seeing from everywhere else. And then we get some nice detail of it. Now, this is a very, widescreen landscape type of approach to telling it. And this is what I was seeing when I was writing it. Slightly different variations. But what we have here is we have 5 panels. Okay. And dealing with 6 elements. I was essentially considering the title as a panel. It's a very small panel, of course, but it's a panel because it contains information. Now, I could do this any other ways. I could do it in a 6-panel grid, right? And that might be the way to go. In fact, how are we doing time-wise? 7:41. So, in fact, let me show you what I could do with this as that page as different layouts. Now, these are my usual comic layout pages. My Conan pages are a little different. No, that's more regular comic pages than my Conan layout pages. No, those are other layout pages. Huh. They should be like right in the mix here. I got this nice little I got this cooking tray handler right next to my drawing table. I put all my working sheets here. Oh, I know. I was working in the other room earlier today, so that's why they're here. So I have a whole bunch of variations of these pre-printed out comic layout pages. They're all to scale of the books they're going to be in. And so that's why I use them. Also, all these lines are on the outside. That's when I'm doing a lot of perspective, because I can do fake perspective grids by paying attention to what these lines are on the outside. Okay, so I know full well I'm going to have about that much off the top. None of these panels are going to bleed. I don't think. Not at this point, even though it's going to be a bleed comic book. So I'm going to do all the. That's another thing. I'm not a big fan of having everything bleed because everything bleeds, because you can. I'm a big believer like avoiding splash pages, unless you actually have something really, really important to use that splash page for. To really in the amount of real estate that you have for a story, splash pages use up a lot of real estate. So that better be the biggest explosion in your movie, right? So I have this. I don't want to get away from this. I like this panel a lot. I've drawn this panel about 6 or 7 times since I initially wrote the story. I feel this is the best panel for it, but doesn't necessarily mean it's the best page layout. So let me give that much of the page to that panel. So then it's trees. Yeah, up here it's witch house. And then the bleed goes around. So then the witch house is floating a bit on the actual comic layout page. I'm just going to do that. And house. I can even, if these are going to show up independently, I can actually add my name, written and drawn by Richard Pace, over here. But it's going to be in an anthology that's all my work, so I don't have to do that. So now I'm going to take the remaining 4 panels and I'm going to do the rest of this space differently. So I'm just going to break down the design of that top panel that we spent all that time with already. So we know we're doing that. And then we can actually just say, all right, you know what? 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's do Let's move it up a little bit. I want a little bit more space at the bottom. So I want to establish her in the woods. So we do the same thing. We have the smaller figure in the woods with the backpack. It's doing the same thing, and then we can do the close-up here. And then we don't have to worry about that visually walking the figure through the environment as much, because we're now taking a different aspect in terms of laying out the panels. See, immediately already has a very different usage of the space on a page. Yeah, and then you're absolutely right. Everything you do with the page should have intent. Yeah, yeah. It's imagine reading a novel where the writer ended every sentence in exclamation points, and half the dialogue was all caps. So everyone's shouting, everyone's like at the maximum volume. Suddenly, volume means nothing. How you use the space, how you break up the space, everything's under your control as an artist and storyteller. And your only limits are your imagination, your skill set, and the time to do it. So, so right here, big panel of the house, close on her, there. Now I could very easily do that thin panel again, establish that, do the thin panel again, and do these two panels here. Right? I could very easily do that. Or I could similarly do another smaller panel, even move the camera up. Like all the camera work here is very much at eye level. But I could pretend I have like a drone camera. So I have the trees coming up here. And we see that she's leaving the forest behind. Right? So we can actually have her doing that. The trees coming up into the foreground, into the sky. So it's almost like the dead black branches of the fall trees are kind of like holding her like a spider. In fact, honestly, I'd want her moving this way. So we have her leaving the forest. It's a little bit awkward. I don't necessarily like. Let's get this down here a little bit more. I don't necessarily like that. It's very busy. It's not as direct as her leading panel in the previous layout, but it lifts the camera up. And then what I can do for this one, I can actually do an overhead shot of her standing at the pentagram. Wow, that's considering how many pentagrams I've drawn, I can't believe how often I draw them this terribly. Do the tree. I now what I lost in here immediately is that connection to the tree from the walkout panel. Now I could pull out, I could change it and make sure it's in there. And we have her standing down here. So it's going like right there, down there, there, bang. She's moving that direction. And we have her down here. So the idea is that she's walked there. I don't like that solution as much. Although it does reveal the pentagram in a much more clear and direct way. The black stone in the middle that should be standing in for much of the remainder of the sequence. But these are decisions. Is it a good storytelling decision? I like these two panels a lot better than these two panels, but I can come up with a huge range of other solutions. But saying that, I also like these two panels better than these two panels. I'm stuck with this one. Bloodpack and Razorface, a romance? Oh, kind of like throwback to Rob Liefeld, where everything's loud, everything's splash pages, everything's rendered in extreme, open, hyper panic attack lines. Okay. And one of the key points, one of the things where I'm ending at the pentagram on this page, and again, I think I'm going to be doing a hybrid of this. I'm going to do a few more layouts, a little more thoughtful, a little less time sensitive than in this. But this establishes where the action is for much of the remainder of the story. I think I have to pull the script up, but it's the last 2 pages are away from this, or 2.5, 3 pages. There's a transition here, but I need to establish this location because much of what's happening for the next several pages is entirely around here. We're setting up little pots to burn things in here. As she's standing here, some symbols start materializing in the points. And it gets darker, and the fire comes out of these things, and the fires don't go out. It's sort of little cauldrons, so it's like a little ritual, and she's just doing a ritual, and she's a lot closer to the house, but the proximity to the house will be just this black looming shape that she essentially reverse silhouetted against, her being lit, and then this black house that she's staring at, and the glittering windows essentially staring back at her as she goes through the ritual, because it's reflecting the light from the little fires around her. So this is the type of work. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to redo this page, but with those 2 panels, so you can actually see it. Because the more I'm looking at it now, and now that I'm actually talking out loud about it, which is also helpful, the more I feel that this is the direction I'm going to go for that first page. Oh, if anyone's not seen one of this, is a parallel rule. My friend Howard Chaykin gave me this one because they don't make them anymore, and he had the good sense to buy a box of them when he heard that they weren't making them anymore. These, it's wonderful. It's like it rolls parallel. So if I want to make a lot of parallel lines, bang, 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 it has all these dots. So I can do things like put a pen in here, put a pencil in here, and just rotate it, and I can draw a circle or a curved line as I need. This is an excellent little tool. They still make cheaper versions of these parallel rules. This one's got really nice. It's got brass screws to pin it, so I can actually control how it works, and it's got all extra data on and really nice rubber rollers. But anyway, if you like the idea of drawing lots and lots of parallel lines, get one of these. Art supply stores still carry them. And also, by the way, it has this cool thing, this little pushing bit right here in the bottom. It doesn't look like it's moving very much, but you push it in, it locks. So it locks. It's great. I love it. I love it. Just give it a little bit more room. And honestly, this could be very well the type of thing where I would use a bleed. In fact, you know what? We just talked about bleeding, how to use it with a controlled method. Let me do a bleed. So you roll parallel along that way too. I'm such a kid sometimes. Oops, there we go. I could do the bleed here. Go up to this line. It's an arbitrary choice. Okay. So now all this information here, I can even stop in the middle of that panel, which is often the better thing to do. We just have the panel protruding into there. Because it also allows all that extra space. So there we go. So everything up here, like we still have the text up here. We still have that panel for the witch house, which I'm liking the more and more I think about it. Trees. We have this panel over here where she's standing to this side. Trees. Close-up panel of her. Haven't given her a name yet. I just keep saying young woman. I don't know how much of a major player she's going to be after her first couple of stories. After I do the initial like witch world building of how the witches become witches. Okay, her leaving the forest, and that little bit where I talked about needing that sense of her moving left to right, not as needed anymore. It still helps a bit to actually have her leave the forest a bit more. Then I can still do imply the pentagram and the tree, do the ribbon around it. The other trees back here. No, let's make her smaller. Put her in the midground. Okay, and then this bottom panel I did here. This panel here can now go here, and that little bit of extra space past the bleed, that little bit, it doesn't seem like much, but it's huge. So I can do the tree here with the ribbon. I can angle up a little bit more on the pentagram maybe. As long as the important stuff is in the live art area, everything works. And I could still have her, I can have her standing here. That's a little too close, I think. The proximity from her figure there to figure here is too much. So I can actually still do her feet here, standing feet on. And suddenly it's just that little bit of going to the bleed, it becomes a much more visually important panel because it breaks the rules of all the other panels. All the other panels are in the box, white handling edge outside. Suddenly the bottom part of the page opens up, bang. I could have done the reverse. I could have had the witch house panel explode. Yeah, I'm going to do this again. Here we go. So now we've done 3 layouts. Let me show you yet another layout. Okay. There we go. So we do everything that we did in the first panel initially. And now the house, it bleeds. And the trees all go everywhere. And all these other panels are now contained down here. Let me box in the panels here, just to make it more visually obvious. And then in this little gap here, I can put my story title right there. So panel, story title, rest of panels. And that's not really moving the information around that much. It just has a different design impact. The house lives in the open environment. Everything else is taking place in the claustrophobic panels. I can make it bigger. I can make the other panels much, much smaller. Those initial 2 panels here, if I stick with that, they can become smaller still. It's there. No, let's go there. Over there. So she's still standing here in the woods. I'd make her a little bit bigger in relationship to the panel. And then still do the close-up roughly the same size. Depending on how much text, you got to edit that down still. Okay, having her leave. Again, a nice long thin panel. The smaller this panel, the more landscapey, ribbony this panel gets, weirdly enough, the more information about the environment I can get in here. Tree, pentagram. Through. And then I still end up having a decently sized panel here at the bottom to draw. No, do it down here. And then the tree. I can even cut off the bottom of the tree because everyone would read it as a tree. You let the ribbon go in there. And by moving it smaller to the bottom there, even having possibly cut off partially by the tree to give a little bit more depth, I can have her standing there. Maybe a little bit further away from the pentagram because she's a little intimidated by it. It makes her look too big. And way here in the background, we do the tree, showing where she's walked. So right there, we now have 4 layouts. And I didn't really start off with the intention of doing more than 1 or 2. But already we now have multiple layouts, a bunch of different ways I could go. I like the big open drawing to start it off, title interrupting, then getting claustrophobic. I also very much like letting the pentagram panel bleed out. But looking at this, thinking, okay, having it really open to the air at the start, everything gets claustrophobic. I could then make the decision, everything up until dawn, which is a key point in the story, ends up being no bleed. And one of the other things I'm planning to do is the handling or the background or gutter space of the pages are going to be white, and they're going to get darker through the story, and then lighter again when sunrise happens. So I can use even use the gutters and this and all the other white space around the panels as a narrative element. So every single thing you can put on a page is wholly under the storyteller's control. There's nothing, absolutely nothing that you're forced to do. You may be limited in your ability to draw, your ability to compose. Those are limitations you may not be able to overcome, but everything you put on the page is there to tell a story, and as long as you can tell the story, you're doing your job right. So this is what I go through with every single page, although I do a lot more smaller thumbnails that only I can see. Like I would be drawing them like about this size, and it'd be like, oh yeah, I do that, and I can draw it so fast. I can say, okay, and the house is here, title here, long panel, short panel, headshot, smaller figure, trees, really narrow ribbon panel going across, having her walk to space with his trees, and then pentagram and the tree that's right by the pentagram. Right? I mean, I would do 12, 13 of these. And that's the storytelling process. That's the work that I feel I need to do. I feel I need to do work serious work on the storytelling and visual decisions on a page before I start penciling it. Um, there have been times where it's like I scrimped on the work and the deadline felt tight, so I didn't really like put in the massive amount of effort I should have. And I'm halfway drawing a page, and then I'm swearing at myself because I made a decision I wish I didn't, and it may be because it just makes everything harder, or I could have I could have done something better, and I only realized it after working on the page for a bit, which still happens even with all this work because you can always come up with a better idea, or at least a different idea that's more attractive for you. But this is my process for a page. So, see any questions? Yeah, I like the parallel rule. Yeah, I like the title in the middle. It does have a almost like I want to say Wes Anderson, but I don't know if that's applicable. Where it's like the title of the movie shows up after you have your opening sequence. Where here the panel showing the witch house is the opening thing. Bang, you've seen it. Title card. Um, a whole issue like this. Well, it depends. Oh, hey, I Ninja. Um, Yeah, every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern, I do this. I have yet to need to cancel one. So far, I've been pretty consistent. I'm stupidly tired today, and I still did it. But yeah, well, how long did this take? This we're at now. Granted, if I'm not talking and explaining it, I go faster. So I've been streaming for just over an hour, and I think I got a layout I'm going to run with for the first page. I explored all the elements, um, and they're essentially largely variations on the page I initially kind of after when I write a story, I tend to do thumbnails a lot as I write it to make sure I get the story and narrative flow in it. It's one of the perks of being an artist as well as a writer. It's like and working in this medium where it's like I've dealt with writers who have no visual sense, so they just kind of hope they cross their fingers that things will fit. But when I'm writing, I'm going, okay, I'm writing to a beat that makes a page work. And can I visually fit it in? So I thumbnail while I'm writing. So I already knew I was going to be doing something like this page. But I think going through the process, this 1 hour process with you guys here, I have a better page already. Just that little bit of work. Now, an hour doing live, talking and explaining it would probably be 20 minutes to half an hour doing it silently, just focusing on the work. So if it's a 22-page story and all the pages take about this amount of time, then I'm probably done in a day. I can probably do this type of storytelling in a day, maybe a long day or maybe a day in the morning. But that's like 22 pages. And it's really worth the effort when you don't plan, when you just oh god, what's a good term for it? When you just go by the seat of your pants and hope you can figure it out. I think you're doing yourself as a creator a disservice. I think more than anything else, you're doing disrespect to the story, and and as a result, you're disrespecting the reader that you're trying to engage and entertain. I feel that putting this work in every page, where you put the camera, how you're showing the characters, um, is incredibly important. And I hope this process, even though I didn't move the camera around a lot, I played around with it for a couple panels, but I'm not going to stick with that. I like the more eye level stuff. I find, and this is a philosophy thing. I find eye level storytelling is also that meat and potatoes aspect of storytelling because people are used to seeing the world around them from their eye level, from standing height, and it's really easy to use that to establish a normalcy. So as soon as you're outside of that, as soon as you're way above, as soon as you're way below, as soon as the camera's tilted, it has a far more dramatic effect if everything else has a sense of normalcy to it. Um, it's again, it's like all splash pages or anything. It's like if you show restraint when you let yourself go, it has more of an impact on the reader. So okay, so I think at this point, if anyone has any questions about this, or they want me to show something else, or they have ideas, they have an idea for me to change something or something and draw it live, I think this would be the time to let that open for that. Let's see here. Thank you. Second Coming. Do I have it? I usually file them away. I do. I think my Second Coming layout. It really depends on what's happening, how established the characters and the sequence is. I think most of them end up looking roughly to this level of drawing because Leonard's doing finish. Leonard's like just an amazing draftsman. He can draw anything. So these type of slot and their layouts they're not breakdowns. Or is it no? Is it breakdowns? The breakdowns not layouts. Layouts are more like 50% finished pencils. Breakdowns are getting the storytelling and the narrative and the camera work done. If that makes sense. So breakdowns are like a step above thumbnails. Layouts are a step above breakdowns, halfway towards penciling. What Leonard's doing is finished pencils and inks. So yeah, so this is roughly the level of drawing I do. Probably if something's a more complex shape, like I kind of drew cheese here and I didn't really draw them here. This is just because you already know what I'm drawing. To communicate the Leonard, I'd have to go to at least this level, I think. Thanks, Ninja. Puppy Ryan Comics made my artist plan with me on the phone text. Oh yeah, if you have an artist that's refusing to, it's a difference. Trusting the artist to do the storytelling right is one thing. Working with a new artist and they're refusing to work out the narrative with you is a red flag to me. One of the best experiences of my career has actually been on this current Conan project because I had Jim's plot, which I will not wait. Even though I did, I think a pretty good secure job of making sure that no one will ever see his stuff on the script. I blacked it out with a black marker. I had his plot, and we thumbnailed out the whole book. And on a couple of pages, I even laid them out or did breakdowns with him right there as we added and took out some stuff in the plot to make it a better comic story. It's a collaborative process when you're working with other people, and that's pedantic. Working on my own, I have to rely on myself, right? I have friends I can show stuff to get their feedback, but if they're not specifically a hired editor, I'm not collaborating with them. I'm asking for feedback. But if I'm working with a writer or I'm working with an artist, because I have written for other artists, it's a collaboration. So the more you actually interact, communicate with your collaborative partners, the better the work's going to be. They're going to come up with ideas that you didn't think of. And more often than not, that just makes the book better. Yeah, if you're, it's terrible when you're just writing. If you're the writer in a comics project, communicating with your artist will only make the story come across better because your artist will be able to ask you questions to tell the story better. And the artist might come up with visual narrative techniques that will tell the story better. So that's incredibly important. And I guess I totally understand why that what went wrong with your Panda King comic. Yeah, Sorrentino, I think I feel his storytelling is so much better, and this is going to sound like criticism. His storytelling is his strongest ability as a comics artist. His drawing is good; it's solid. I get the whole photo reference approach. I know a lot of people will do it, but I feel he's one of the guys who actually. There's some artists out there who photograph everything, and their comics read like fumetti. if you're familiar with the term, it's like there used to be, and it's called fumetti because I think it all started in Italy. It was photo comics where it was comics, but they had actors, actresses, sets, photographers. I think some of them were actually stills taken from Italian soap operas, so they could tell the same story but in a magazine. I find a lot of artists who rely too heavily on photo reference end up doing fumetti, whereas Andrea does such brilliant work in his storytelling. He doesn't do that. He actually he delivers a story, and his partnership with Lemire is great. Uh, most of the best lessons are learned through some sort of trauma. Um, I mean, you can make a mistake and not learn from it because it's a minor mistake. You just go, oops, right? But if it's a big mistake, if it torpedoes a project, you're never going to make that mistake again. So the bigger the blowback for an error or a choice that doesn't work out, the more you learn from it if you're engaged with your process. So, all right. Any other questions? We're rolling towards 8:15. I think everyone knows I usually keep these at about an hour. Sometimes they go long because the drawing is taking forever or something, but I like to keep these to an hour. I already got Anson saying goodnight, so I think he wants to get the hell out of here too. So, all right, Ninja. Yeah, next week. Yeah, I think next week I owe you guys some Conan because I initially said I was going to do Conan tonight, but again, oh my god, so many pens. I'm killing so many. I'm gonna have to make another order. I mean, you've seen my supply. Um, I got lots of pens, but some of these boxes are near empty. I haven't been using the markers as much as the pens. Yeah, I might even go to bed early tonight because I'm just that tired. All right, everybody, you have a great night. Next week, I promise you Conan work. And that's it. Same pace time, same pace channel. Have a good night, guys.